Welcome everybody to today's presentation. Thank you for being here. My name is Hamid and today I'll be taking you through the latest release of GVERSE GeoGraphix. This is version 2023.2. It's been out for a couple of months, so it is available for download and you can get straight into it if you want. And I have a lot to cover today because we've added a ton of functionality in this version. So in the interest of time, to keep this short, I'm going to be breezing through a lot of these features. But if you spot something interesting and are curious to learn more about it or have comments and feedback or questions, please feel free to reach out and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, so let's get this started, and I'm going to kick things off with GeoAtlas because this is one of the biggest upgrades to GeoAtlas functionality in a long time. We've enhanced almost every way that you interact with GeoAtlas. This includes features to help manage all the layers on your map, some big changes in creating and working with Isomap Layers that removes a lot of the limitations that have been in place, and a whole lot of other things listed here on the slide that I'll be taking you through. So let me switch over to GeoAtlas. I have a map here, and the first thing that you'll notice is that this layer panel looks a little different. And the most obvious difference here is this search bar. Now this map that I have is only a handful of layers, but most of our users have hundreds of layers on their maps. And there's no easy way to find a specific layer that you're looking for. So this is where the search bar is really helpful, because I can just type in a search term here and it'll match that term anywhere in the layer name and list only the layers that match the search. Kind of like how a search is supposed to work. So you can find what you need really quickly. And we've also added these bulk action buttons. So once you find your layers, let's say you want to put them on the map, you can just one click put everything on your map, or one click take those things off your map, or you hide them from your map. So a search hopefully will go a long way in helping you find what you need on your sprawling maps. We've also added filtering options here. So let's say I have my map. Again, imagine this is a really long list and you're only looking for, let's say, WellBase layers. So you can now filter your layer list to just show WellBase layers, and it will now show you the filtered list. So you can now then go in and find what you need. Again, the bulk buttons work here as well. If you want to turn them all on, you can. When you hide them, it will also hide all of those particular layers. All right. Within the filter and sort options, you also have the ability to sort by the layer name, layer type, or modified date. So let's say you wanted this list sorted by modified date. Now it's showing me these layers, WellBase layers, because that's the filter I selected, sorted by which one was modified the last. And the search kind of applies on top of all of this. So if I were to search now, it's not going to search every F11 layer that I have. It's only going to find layers in that filtered sorted list, which is going to show up over here. Now, of course, once you've searched it or filtered it, this list is no longer a complete description of your map. For starters, it's not the whole list of layers, but also even if it was the whole list of layers, they're not going to be in display order. So that's where these buttons will be disabled, but you have one click revert option to get back to your complete list of layers, so that all the filtering and the search terms and everything is kind of cleared and you are back to your complete list of layers. So hopefully the ability to search and filter will help you find the layers that you need on your maps much more quickly. Now, another difference that you might have noticed is that I have all of my layers grouped together into these categories. We're calling these layer stacks, and the intention here is, again, for maps that have a lot of layers on there, give you a way to organize your layers, group them together into categories, so your maps are more manageable. We call them layer stacks. The primary reason for that is because we don't want this to be confused with a group layer, because it is not a new kind of layer. It is a construct that lives on the map only. It is saved with the GMP file, and is not really saved as part of your project. It's saved as part of your actual as your actual map. Now the way it works is pretty simple. Layers that are in a stack, I can turn their visibility on and off together. For example, I've got this one called culture data with the grid in there, surface features, a satellite image. So I could turn these all on and off together. It doesn't turn off the grid because that's my active layer. You can't really turn off your active layer. But you can go in there and change individual layers as well. You can turn these on and off. You can change the entire display order, so I could move the entire stack up and down. You notice that they move as a unit. together in the display order. So the stack is kind of like just a bundle of layers, a group of layers that are kind of moved or handled together. Within the stack, I can change the display order. I can, change their visibilities. Of course, like I said, you can change the visibility of the entire stack as well. To create a stack, all you need to do is find the layer, right click on it, say add to stack, choose an existing stack that is on your map, or create a new one here. Let's just call it well layers. And then you can drag and drop layers in there. You can obviously right click and say I want this in my well layer stack, and that's going to add those layers to your stack. Then you can control them all together as well. Now on here, if I want to get rid of a stack, all I need to do is right click and say unstack my layers. That will delete the stack, take all these layers and put them on the map. So it's not taking the layers off the map, it's just removing them from the stack. If you say remove from map, that's when it's going to remove those layers from the map. If I say unstack, it just removes the stack. When I save it, it saves not only everything in the map, but also the number of stacks, what layers are in the stack, which ones are turned on, which ones are turned off. All that information is saved with the map. So layer stacks are another way for you to organize your maps along with the searching and filtering. We hope these options will go a long way in getting your gigantic sprawling maps under control. Right, staying with the map view, we've added the ability now to add your scale bars directly onto your map view. This has been a feature that was limited to your page view, but the limitation there is that when you zoom in or pan away, the scale bar kind of disappears. So you don't really know the scale that you're looking at any given time. But the scale bar here will let you handle that. You can add as many as you need. So all the graphical scale bars, you can add as many as you want in as many different units as you want. You can also add your north arrows now. So you can go in here and just add a north arrow, anyone I like. Up here, that's also kind of static up here in the top end. And just makes your map a little more complete. So when you're taking a screenshot, you always have that little north arrow pointing upwards to have a more complete picture. Right, so that's some of the changes in our map view. Now let's get on to the other big change within GeoAtlas, which is how we handle isomaps. Now, one of the biggest limitations with isomaps has been how when you create an isomap layer, the grid actually goes to the ends of your AOI. So for this particular example, the wells that I'm working with are right over here, not covering my entire AOI, but if I were to grid any layer for data from this group of wells, the resulting grid would be covering the entire AOI, which means people have had to create smaller AOIs to be able to kind of just create isomap layers that fall within the extents of their data and all that. So that is changing with 2023.2. Now when I create an isomap layer, I can choose my grid extents. I can say, hey, limit my extents of my grid to my boundary polygon. Now, if you want to do the whole AOI, you can always switch this to AOI extents. That is still going to create the grid that goes to the extents of your AOI. Whatever the reason you need that for, you still have that option. So if you're not taking that away, you can also do data extents. If your data extents are going to be different from your boundary polygon, you could still have your grid that goes to the extents of your data. Your boundary polygon could be different, but we default to boundary polygon, which is going to be created by default now. When you create an isomap layer, we will always default to creating a boundary polygon around your data extents. So let's click OK here, and we're going to create a layer. I'm just going to go to WellBase. Let's do a structure map. So I'm going to go sub C. Let's do the F39 for all my sources. Click OK here. Let's just give it a name. Right, so when I go next, I can now set my grid parameters. Here's my gridding algorithm. I go to grid spacings. There's my grid extents. So now I can choose again AOI, data extents, or I could customize, provide custom values here as well. I'm going to leave that as boundary polygon. Another change that you'll notice here is that we have the ability now to load all of these grid settings via templates. So you've got templates that you can save your grid settings to. I'm going to use this template that I saved already. And you notice it reads the smallest feature radius from my template. Everything on this page is read from the template. So everything on the geologic page is read from the template. So it loads everything from that template saving you the hassle of going in and typing all these values up again. And if you have your a set of parameters that you use very, very often, it'll save you a ton of time just by being able to load them quickly from a template. Right, so that's my grid spacing though. The main thing is that I can now set my grid extents. Let's go next here. On here then I can set my display settings. Now the most important one here, or the one I really want to show you here, is the boundary polygon. Like I said, we default to creating this new boundary polygon, but we've added a new option where you can add a buffer distance to it. So I could say create a new polygon with a buffer. Let's make that 1,000 feet. What that does is it's going to create a boundary polygon around my data extents, and then it's going to inflate that by 1,000 feet. The intention here being that you get these edge effects because our boundary polygons are so close to your data extents, get these edge effects that you don't really like. So what people end up doing is kind of going in there, redrawing their boundary polygons, copying it from another layer or something. So now instead of doing all of that, you can add a buffer distance, which takes that boundary polygon, inflates that by the distance that you specify here, and hopefully you can get rid of some of those edge effects. Another thing to show you here is the ability to load your templates. So the templates that I showed you just before this, were for your grid settings only. Now you can also set a template for your display settings, which will include, do you want your data points to show, and how do you want them to appear? Do you want your contours to show, and what you want your bold and regular contours to be? Do you want the labels turned on or not? And what, the font size and all those display settings that go along with an Isomap are saved in a display settings template. Now the display settings template will also set your contour intervals, minimum, maximum contours. Now, of course, these settings are very data specific. You don't want a contour interval for a porosity map to be the same as for a structure map, for example. So when you're loading a template, let me just kind of find this template here. You have the option to say, okay, I want to ignore my contour interval. I want to ignore my contour, min, max, color palette settings, all that kind of stuff, because the data that I'm gridding, the settings in my template are not really applicable to that. Now the template that I created was specifically for this map, so I'm going to leave this as on, but this is an option that you could turn off and it wouldn't touch any of your contour settings. So click OK here. You'll notice that my contour settings, because I did decide to bring them in, change. If I go to my data point options, you'll notice that now it's not a plus sign anymore, which was 500 feet. It's a circle for 90 feet, orange in color. My contours are a shade of purple. So all of those display settings are copied over, and you do your template. So once you have your settings done, I'll hit finish. That's going to create my structure map. You see my boundary polygon is kind of inflated around my wells. Got my contours and data points displayed the way I wanted them through my template. But the most important thing here is my grid. Now you notice that the grid is no longer going to the extents of my AOI. It is actually kind of just big enough to fit my boundary polygon, and that's it. We still need to be north, south, east, west. We still need to be orthogonal. So we can't do the exact grid as the boundary polygon, but what we do is we make it just big enough to fit that polygon and not an inch more. So that's the extent of my grid, and regardless of the size of your AOI, you could be gridding your project could be the size of Texas, but in this case your grid will always only be as big as your data extents if you choose it to be. Another thing to note here is that you can also choose existing polygons on any layer. So let me switch this back to my LandNet layer, and let's choose these tracks here. Let's say you wanted to regrid your Isomap layers to be limited to these polygons. Once you have the polygon selected, all you need to do is right-click a layer and say regrid to selected region, and that's going to launch the thing again, and it is going to limit the size of your grid to the polygon that you selected. Now, if I were creating a layer, so if I had my polygons selected and I go to layer create options again, I go to Isomap, you will notice the selected region option pop up. So if I had that selected before I launched my layers create, I'd be able to do that straight away. But if I didn't do that, I will still want to regrid an existing layer or a layer that I just created. All I need to do is right click here with my polygon selected, go regrid to selected region, hit finish, and that is going to regrid to that selected region. Let me turn on my grid again, and now you notice that the grid is now only in that within that polygon. Again, it is still orthogonal, so this irregular shape of the polygon is not honored, but we make it exactly big enough to fit the polygon that you actually selected. So your grid is limited to your selected polygon. So that's a couple of different important ways that we've changed how your Isomap work. The grid size is now constrained. You've got templates you can use for your grid settings and for your display settings. A lot more that you can do with your boundary polygons. One thing that I kind of failed to show you here, let me turn this grid off, is that if I have a polygon selected and I go and update my layer here again, I can limit my boundary polygon to that existing polygon. So I could say polygon options, use the existing, not the existing polygon, I want to use the selected region here, hit finish, and that is going to limit my boundary polygon to, or make my boundary polygon exactly the shape of the polygon that I had selected. So you have the ability to take your existing polygons on existing layers and use them as your boundary polygons as well. So hopefully that takes away a lot of the limitations that have been hindering your workflows or forcing you to create these numerous AOIs that you really didn't need for any other purpose except to manage your Isomap layers. Hopefully we've been able to reduce some of those limitations so that you are more flexible with what you can do. All right, moving on, other stuff. We have improved the way we work with conditional pies. So let me just kind of go here to create conditional pies here. You'll notice that I have a couple of criteria turned on for my digital logs. We can now use multiple mnemonics within the same row. We have introduced the in operator here. So instead of just limiting yourself to a single mnemonic per criteria that you add here, you can now add multiple curves here. We've also made zone selection a little easier, so you just can drop down here, select your zone or type that in. You don't have to kind of checkbox on the zone and then choose a zone and redo your curve and all that stuff that goes with it. We've also enhanced how we search through raster curves. You can now search on specific raster curves, just like logs. You also have the in operator, so it could be a single image, it could be multiple images. So if I hit apply here, what I'm seeing here is the red wells are all wells that have either the D row curve or the row B curve. So those are the red wells. The green wells are the ones that have the specific image available in them, the density neutron large image, and that's one well here. So that's looking for this exact image name. This is looking for either the D row mnemonic or the row B mnemonic, and that's what I'm seeing on the map. Another addition that we've done is that you can still kind of use this drop down or type the values in, but we've also added the selection dialog, which lists all your default curves or all the curve mnemonics that you have available, unless you kind of quickly add or remove the criteria that you want to add here. This works for your log curves as well as your raster images, because these raster images names can be super long to type, a lot of different names available, so you can kind of go through and choose from this list. Again, one name or multiple names, and that will be automatically updated into the criteria. So that's kind of some of the changes that we've made in working with log curves and conditional pies. Another feature here is the ability to save your conditional pie criteria as a WellBase filter. So whatever is the criteria defined here, I can save this as a WBF filter, and we save the actual criteria, not a list of wells. So it's not a static list of wells. It's the actual criteria. So every time you rerun the filter, or every time you run the filter, it will show you the most recent state of the database. So it's going to go in there, fetch the wells that match the criteria, and return those list of wells. It's not a static list of wells that have matched the criteria at the time of creating the filter. So this is hopefully going to be very useful when you have the wells that you need. And this doesn't only apply to these two criteria. It could be any criteria that you use to create your conditional pies, and then you can take those wells and use them in other parts of GeoGraphix as well. Right, so let's take those off here. What else do I want to show you? Yes, annotations can be a lot more precise now. So if I were to draw a line here, for example, I'm just going to draw this one line here. I can go to the annotation properties for this line, and now I can specify the length of this line. Let's say I want this to be a mile long, 1 US survey mile. I can hit apply, and that's going to extend my line so that it is 1 mile long. Let's make it a little bigger. Let's make it 2 miles, and that's going to extend the line to 2 miles. You can make it shorter. You can change units. Let's say you want to say this is just 1,000 feet, and now so I can kind of do this much more easily. Instead of having to eyeball it or using the distance measurement tool or anything like that, I can actually create exact lengths of lines here. Same thing for your rectangles. When I draw a rectangle here for my annotations, I can specify the area for that rectangle. Let's say you wanted this to be 1 square mile, hit apply, and that's going to give you a rectangle which is 1 square mile. If you wanted to do this as a square, let's say you wanted to do a square which is 1 square mile, I'll unlock my aspect ratio, do 1,000 feet by 1,000 feet here, square. Then I can say lock my aspect ratio, make this 1 square mile, and that is a square of 1 square mile, exactly 1 square mile on your map. Again, just a quick way to get your annotations to be a lot more precise than you can get them to be now. Right, so let me kind of just remove those 2 annotations here. Another kind of staying with annotations, another feature that we've added is now when you're in your WellBase layers, let me just make that my, let's go in here and update this layer, because what I can do now is, sorry, this is the wrong layer. Let me turn on my F11 layer, because what I want to show you here is that these postings that you can do at the formation intercept, you can now change that. Number one, you can change the symbol of this interception. It's instead of using a generic symbol like a cross or a plus or a circle, you can actually use well symbols here. So let me go to layer display attributes, and for my F11 wells, what I'm going to do is for my formation intercept with well, I'll go to the entity for this particular one, change this X mark to a library symbol based on my well status. View, and now it changes. I just have one horizontal well or deviated well here, so that's not a particularly good project to show you this, but you get the idea. Instead of just having a generic symbol, I can now use my library symbols here to show the formation intercept as an actual well symbol. The other thing that we can do here is that this label that you see here posted at this formation annotation, kind of hard to see, but it has no rotation. You can now, let me just kind of go here, update my layer. You can now change that. You can right click here, say rotate, and you'll see a parallel to wellbore path option. So when I click on that, click OK here again, when it reforms the layer, you'll notice that this label is now rotated to match the wellbore orientation at this point. It's hard to see because this is such a small, it's running so east-west, but if I turn on my well spots, for example, you notice that this TD for this one is no rotation, and the 6288 that you see for my formation intercept is rotated to match the wellbore orientation. Again, not the best well to show you this, but that's pretty much the only one I have available in this project for me to show you. So I did want to show you that you can now get a lot neater looking maps for your deviated displays, because you can now rotate your labels to be parallel to the wellbore orientation. Right, let's move on to some of the other things. I'm going to switch back to my slideshow here. What do we have here? Yeah, we looked at that. Yeah, this is a better example, right? Because I have my deviated wellbores. You can see the formation intercept as symbols and the rotated labels here. Without having to manually rotate every single label, it is just automatically rotated according to the wellbore orientation. Also, another important change is the annotation information in shapefiles. We now actually can take the actual shapefile for your annotations and pop them in other GIS softwares, and they will work right off the bat. You don't need to pre-process anything in GeoGraphix anymore. You can just take that shapefile, plop it into another GIS software, and it is going to recognize those annotations. A lot of other enhancements too, we really don't have the time to go through. We've added a ton of hotkeys. We've made a lot of bug fixes, including that annoying eyeball issue where your eyeballs wouldn't poke if you had them on another screen other than your primary screen. And that's kind of sorted as well, so your eyeballs will work with whatever screen you want to put them on, and a ton of other bug fixes within the application as well. All right, moving on to data management. A lot of feature functionality here as well. We've gone into the data model itself, added a couple of new fields for storing data, the rig release date, the directional indicator, as well as played with or improved the precision of some of our data types. The core data depths can now be 3 decimal places. Core data itself, the numeric data, is up to 8 decimal places. Same thing for your lat longs. We've increased the precision there as well, so that you can have more precise locations in your database. For our core data, we've also added new text fields because all the user-defined fields that we have are all numeric. Really leaves no place for descriptive data, so we've added 10 new text fields where you can add text data for your core analysis to be able to accommodate those descriptions. On the filtering side, we have a new set operation which lets you subtract 2 filters. So if you've got filter A, filter B, you can do A minus B, which will return every well that is part of filter A, but not part of filter B. It's kind of shown here in the orange highlighted area. This is available as a set operation in Query Builder. Other things is, I think this is an important one. Again, a basic feature that was missing in WellBase was the ability to refresh your filter. In fact, let me kind of switch over to WellBase so I can show this to you. I've got a filter here applied called gas wells. Now, if I were to, if I had to refresh this filter, I would have to kind of change the filter to another one and then come back here, and that would give me the latest results. But also that will be dependent on whether there's a cache available or not. If there is a cache, it would just give me, the same well list again, not only reflect the state of my current state of my database. So we've added this rerun filter option here. You no longer have to go to Query Builder to do all of this. You can just hit refresh here or rerun filter here. It's going to go back to the database, bypass the caching, get your results back, update the cache if there's any changes, and now you get your latest well list here. So it's kind of, think of it like a refresh button. Goes to the database, gives you sees what new wells or any wells that match the criteria in the past don't no longer match that criteria. So updates your list just with one single click. Other things that we've added is that these log availability buttons are now more consistent with the rest of the application. They light up in blue if you have data available there. And once you go in one of them, you can actually select a log and now, using this button, really quickly see what data you have available. So here I can see the GR curve. Not really, the top part of it is empty, is nulled out. I just have data in here. So a quick way for me to go in and see all the information that I have available in terms of log data for these wells. It's a basic well. It's not pretending to be something where you can pick tops and all that. It's just a quick way to look at what data that you have. We do have some basic functionality like being able to switch between linear and log scales, being able to flip your curves if you're used to viewing it in one way or the other, zoom in, zoom out, of course, and all of those things available for you to quickly take a look at without having to go into Petrophysics or finding out another way to see what this log information is all about. Right now, this is not available for raster data. That is something that we are working on. Should be available soon. So you'll be able to view your raster data really quickly, really soon here as well. Other things here include our well summary view, which will go through, give you a well schematic. It will give you a kind of a report format for all the data that you have available in your well. We've made a lot of fixes here in WellBase as well. So for example, when you now multi-select wells in a well list, you can simply just right-click here and you'll have the access to your well menu. So you're able to create cross sections, highlight wells. I mean, you don't have to switch to a grid view to be able to access all of those features. You can do this right off of your well list. And there's a ton of other fixes that I'll kind of show you really quickly here. But I do want to show you some other Isomap related changes that we've done to Zone Manager. One, when you are importing Isomap layers now, when you're sampling Isomap layers into your zone, number one, we've made it a bulk operation. So you can actually go in there and select multiple layers. You can do multiple grids, and we will kind of read them into a zone and attribute for you directly in one go. So you just set this up once. You can do this individually, select a zone, select an attribute, or you can go through here and select the ones that you need. Let's say you want this one here, and this one here, and this one here. You click OK, and that sets your zone and attribute. Let's get rid of some of these. And that's how I can kind of do this in bulk. So I can sample all of these to these grids to these attributes in these zones all at the same time. But also for your horizontal well borers, you can now sample along the well bore at this increment. I could change this to, let's say, 50 feet. So every 50 feet along the horizontal well bore, it's going to sample the grid, and then it's going to take an average, or the minimum value, the maximum value, or the sum of all those, and add that value to the selected attribute. So it's going along the well bore, it's sampling every 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever you specify here, and then collecting all that information, extracting a stat from it, and saving that to your target attribute. And you can do it as soon as the well enters the zone, so at the zone top, end it at the zone base, which is kind of, the interval that you're working on. Or you could say, hey, I want it to be a certain inclination. So after it reaches 80 degrees or 85 degrees, that's when you want to start sampling. You can do that for your start, and for the end, you can either, as soon as the well leaves the zone, or you can go all the way to the end of your well, and that will then sample everything. In this particular case, from 80-degree angle, going all the way to your total depth, and add that attribute or add that value, that average, to your target attribute. So, and right now it's kind of very limited to just your well bore, the exact well bore definition. We are looking at adding a buffer distance here, so you can actually spread out from or look around the well bore, if you will, while you're making these samples. Another new feature, again related with isomaps, is the ability to create layers in bulk. So when I go Isomap bulk layer create, I can then select multiple attributes at the same time, click OK here, and that's going to create layers for them. So here's my zone, my attribute. So it's going to go in and create these 4 layers, or however many you select, zone attributes that you select, for me. Now I can override layers, so I have a list of all the layers available here. I can select override one, I can type in a name here, got my override checkbox here as well, so it lets you update layers. Now of course you don't want to run it for all the wells in your project. If you don't have a filter applied on WellBase, on Zone Manager, you can still do this in bulk. You can just say, hey, I want to do this for my gas wells, and that's going to apply that filter here. You can change this individually as well, but this button up here will let you apply that in bulk. Same thing for your templates, your grid templates, your display templates. You can choose them individually, you can choose them in bulk here as well. And when I hit OK, it's going to create these 4 layers using this filter, using whatever templates I specify for each zone and attribute that I have. Gives you the status right here as well. Everything is logged, so if it fails on some layer, it will let you know. If it is successful, it will let you know. If the layer is locked or something, the status will let you know instantly what that problem is. You can go in and have that fixed. So a few, again, focus on efficiencies, just trying to make sure that all the layers that you want to create, the layers that you want to sample, you can do that quickly without having to do that for every single parameter that you want to import and that you want to create a layer for. Right, so let's look at some of the other enhancements. We're now supporting Spotfire version 14. We've got a couple new coordinate systems. We've made it easier to find wells that have bad locations while you're importing data. So if you get blown extents, you're able to, in the log file, very quickly spot which wells actually cause that to happen, so you can take mitigating action. We talked about the new highlights that we have, and then a ton of bug fixes that I obviously don't have enough space or time to go through. So that's data management and everything that we've done around that. Right, so let's now move on to the next which is GeoPlus. Been a focus for us in the past releases. The cross-section keeps getting better and better. We've worked on some of the ways that we are improving our integration of this tool with the rest of GeoGraphix, a few other enhancements as well. So let me bring this up, and the first thing I want to show you I'm just going to kind of bring up a cross section here. I'm going to be talking about the cross section a little bit. And the first thing I want to show you is my log data readout tool. This is really helpful, very useful, because what it does is as soon as I put my mouse on a well, on a cross section, it reads out the exact values of those curves for me in that floating window that I have over here. So as I move my mouse up and down, it will tell me, up here, it will tell me the exact MD, TVD, TVDSS of the cursor location, along with the values for all the curves that are in there. Now it does list your track. It gives you a preview of the line, so you know exactly what all of this is doing. It also lists the name of the curve, any alias that you're looking at, and basically helps you just figure out what those values are for any of the wells that you have in your cross section. Now, and this works across different cross sections too. So if I were to kind of bring this one up here as well, sorry, I just want to kind of, right. And if I were to activate my log data tool again, as I move my mouse from cross section to cross section, from well to well, it does give me information that I need, which is under, so I don't need to activate my cross section or open this window for every, because if you have like 15 cross sections open, you can still have just one log data readout window, and as you are kind of moving through your cross sections, you're able to see exactly what each of these curves are. I've got two tracks, track A, track B. The green is gamma ray, the red is res D. In this particular well, that's the curve mnemonic is ILD because that's been aliased. I can look at my values, I can look at my depth values. I know what well I'm in because that's given here on the top as well. I know what cross section I am because I could be in two different cross sections. So a really cool little tool to help you really see what you're working with on your cross sections. Other changes that we have here include a lot of control over how we how many things we can see, hide or unhide here. Now, if I were to go to my wells tab here, when I hide a well on this cross section, let me actually make this smaller again so you can actually see your see the map view here as well. When I hide a well here, let's say I'm working here with my cross section and I just want to temporarily hide this well, I can hide this using the button here. That actually changes my line of section, so it actually makes the well disappear from my cross section, but it's still here in the well list. It's kind of grayed out, so it's still part of the well list, but it's not visible on my line of section. When I bring it back, it comes back in at exactly the same spot. So a very quick way, and you can do this for multiple wells, right? So you can just kind of hide all of the wells. I just have two wells left. That's a straight cross section here, and then I can add, wells back in whatever order I need them back in, and that is going to redefine my line of section so that I can now see all of the wells as I need to see them. So that's a neat little feature to help you kind of have, if you have like 30 wells in your cross section, you can hide the ones you don't want right now without worrying about having to find them and add them back into your cross section again. Other stuff, let's go to the surfaces tab. Now you can hide your correlation lines. So if I were to go in here and hide a particular correlation line, leaving the formation in there, I can just hide the correlation line there. I have the ability to display multiple sources and observations. If I click OK here, this particular well, let me kind of zoom in here, and you're able to see multiple observations, multiple sources for those observations as well. So you have control over that here. As well, we've also added a pretty cool shortcut for controlling how you change your vertical exaggeration. So if I hold the control key down and scroll in or scroll up or scroll down, I can zoom in or zoom out. But let's say I'm looking at these three wells and I'm kind of I want to get a closer look, but I don't want to lose these three wells. So now I can hold my shift key down, scroll up to squeeze my cross section, scroll down to expand it. Looks like a simple thing, but once you get used to it, there's no turning back. This is really helpful because just lets you stretch and squeeze in the Z axis, holding the shift key down, using the scroll wheel, just to get a better look at what my wells are doing. So stuff like that hopefully makes it easier to work with your cross sections. We've also done a few changes on how you interact with the map here. In the 2022 3.1 version, we let you create and update these isomaps and conditional pies and WellBase layers. Now you can control the layer display attributes and update layers for any layer type that's available. So it's not open for all layer types. You can go in and you can manage all of these different layers right from the GeoPlus map. Sorry, I don't have access for that particular layer because it's open in my GeoAtlas map. But yeah, so you're able to adjust your layer display attributes, update your layers directly from the GeoPlus map. We've also introduced an interpretation browser, which lets you connect to any other interpretation in your project, and you can filter on AOIs and date modified. You can search and all that. So let's say I connect to this particular interpretation. It's going to give me a list of all the cross sections available in that particular interpretation. I can select the ones which I want to bring over, and I can do the same thing for my templates. So I could go in here, I can choose my templates, hit transfer, and that's going to bring in those cross sections, those templates into my interpretation, so that I can now use them within my interpretation, and without having to dig through those folders to find those ones. If I go to templates here, here's the simple and the standard that I just kind of imported, and I can double click, and that's going to apply those templates to my box. Other things that we've added in the 3D view, we've added a new, let me just kind of hide these cross sections here. We've added a new distance measurement tool, which lets you kind of go through and measure distances in the 3D world. Let me kind of show you what I mean. I'll turn that on. We have two modes. One is the continuous mode, where you can do a series of clicks, and this could be anywhere, anything that's in, that's an object in 3D. So I could be clicking on a surface, I'd be clicking on a well. If I have a formation displayed, I could be clicking there. So I can kind of go through and define a path in a series of clicks, and that is going to give me a distance for every line segment. So I'm starting here with this red dot, going up to this blue dot. That's about 1,300 feet because I've changed kind of depth distance as well. That's like 439 feet in depth. The linear distance is, if I were to walk along this line, how long would I have to walk? That will be about 1,441 feet. The azimuth is about 80 degrees, so pretty much east-west. And it gives me that information for every line segment that I have. Like the blue to yellow dot is 120 degrees. This is about 1,000 feet of map distance, which is my horizontal distance, 1,100 in total, and so on and so forth. So it goes in, and it also gives me a total map distance, which would be my horizontal distance, and a total linear distance, which would be if I were to follow this line in the 3 dimensions. The other mode that we have is called a radial mode, which basically lets me decide a point. Again, you could be clicking anywhere, any object that's available in 3D. So let's say I'm just going to click here. That's my initial starting point, and then I could be clicking, at other objects. And what this is going to do is it's going to measure the distance to each of those other clicks from this first point that I did. So this red to blue, that's this line over here, this line over here. That's about 40 degrees of azimuth. It's about 10 feet in depth, and it has a map distance of 1656. Gives it a total linear distance of 1657. So it kind of goes through and does it for every little segment that I have. Again, this is 3-dimensional, so I've got this little kind of depth distance going over here, which would be this one here, red to orange, 2,400 feet. There's my depth distance, about 260 feet, 130 degrees azimuth. So all of that information available here. This is only available in 3D for now. We are updating our map tools and even on the cross section, so you should be seeing that soon as well. 2023.2 enables this this particular version in 3D. All right, let's get back to the presentation here. And now we're going to be talking about GVERSE Petrophysics. So let me bring that up because this is pretty exciting. One of the things that we've added in GVERSE Petrophysics is the ability to take your azimuthal curves. So I've got like these 4 gamma ray curves, left, up, right, and down. So I've got these as individual last curves that I imported into my project. I can now create what we're calling array curves. These are azimuthal curves. So I can go to my curves drop down. Let me switch to import to. There's those curves. I created one already, but I can hit the add button. I can say I don't want a conventional curve, which is your typical last file, one value per depth. I can do an array curve, which is multiple values per depth. Give it a name. Let's just say GR4 sector. Sorry for the typo there. And I'm going to give it 5 sectors because I want it to wrap around. And then I can select my curves. I can say the first one should be my left. Then let's go up and right and then down. And then I'm just going to put left back in again, so it's wrapping around. Click OK, and that's going to create a new new array curve, which is basically for each depth value that I have, it's going to take the value from these 5 curves, create a new curve which has 5 values for each depth. Right, I hit OK. That's going to create that curve for me. I'm going to click OK here. Now to display that data, I'll right click, add an array curve track, go to the attributes for the track, select my curve set, select my curve. You can choose your right, left as well. And then I can choose a color palette. I don't have a specialist color palette here, but let's just going to use black, white, red. Low values are going to be black, high values are going to be yellow, middle values are going to be white. I'm going to click OK here, hit apply, and now I have those 5 curves, 4, but remember I wrapped around my left curve, displayed here on a track. So I'm able to now look at my image tracks and see how my borehole is looking like as I go down or unwrap this. Of course, this is like any other normal track. I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller. If I go back in here to show you exactly how this works, I'm going to uncheck this interpolate values option. So it's basically creating these 5 tracks per sample, color coding them, and then with the interpolation, I can get to see that kind of like that smoothened out image, which helps me picture what the wellbore is actually looking like if I were to unwrap it. Of course, you can also treat this as any other track. So I can add to this array track. Sorry, I didn't want to add a new track. Let's just kind of remove that. I can add to this array track any other curve. So I could go here to my array curve. I could say from my import to add my, I think I have a GR, but I'm just going to add my GR left on top of it. Hit apply, and that's going to add that GR curve onto that array curve track as well. So I can overlay all of these 4 curves on that same track as well to get that information that way as well. So, and because this is part of the PRT, this is saved as part of the PRT, you can add this to your cross sections, and you are able to view those image logs on your cross sections as well. Another feature that we've added within our Petrophysics application is the ability to graphically splice your curves, make that process a little easier. So let's say I have these 2 curves coming in here, the NPSS in import 1, the NPSS in import 2, and I've got an overlap here, and I want to splice that. I can go to my curves menu, hit the graphical curve splice, add my import 1 curve, and I'll choose NPSS, add my import 2 curve. Let's go NPSS again, and I'm just going to differentiate them using a different color. So let's say the top one, I want this to be blue. I'm going to make it a little thicker. The bottom one, I'm going to make that green, just because that's how they're set up on this particular track. So let's just choose green. Again, make it a little thicker. The output, I'm going to make it, the left would be 0.6, the right will be minus 0.15, and we are going to make this one, let's go red, click OK, and that adds a couple of tracks here. So this is my output track, and this is my input track right here, along with a splice step. I can move up or down, and within that overlap area, anything above this splice step coming from the blue curve, anything below this coming from the red curve, now I have a graphical representation where I want to put my splice. Once I'm happy, I can right click and save, and this will create a new curve. So it's not creating a spliced curve set or anything like, it's not creating pointer curves. It's going to create a physical curve that's going to go into this output curve set, which could be any one of the existing ones, or I could create a new one. And what I can also do, so let's just create a new one. I'm going to call it spliced graphically, just for completeness. But this is not going to be a spliced curve set. So it's not going to have import 1 and import 2 pointers to import 1 and import 2. It's a new curve set with this step, and it's going to have the physical copy of a curve, which is kind of this red curve on this second track. So I could do this for this one curve only, but if most commonly, if you've got one splice step, you're going to want to do it for all your curves in those two curve sets. So you could say, all the common mnemonics in curve import 1 and import 2, which were the two curves that I was using, just splice them together at this particular depth, click OK, and that's going to create those curves, because I had two curves with common mnemonics, NPSS and row B, I want to say, and those have been added here. So if I were to go here, add another linear track, new curve here, you're going to see that curve set spliced graphically, and you're going to see NPSS spliced and row B spliced. And when I add these two curves together, again, not done a good job with my pluses and minuses, it's going to show you those curves right there. Let's delete that. All right, so that's graphical curve splicing. Another feature that we've added is to do with area fills. I've got this curve here, two curves here. I'm using an area fill on each of these tracks. I'm just looking for a good spot there where I can show you this feature at. There's one. So you can see here, I've got this applied to this area fill applied to this track, applies to the entire curve set. I've got another area fill where I'm kind of distinguishing between where my resistivity curves are kind of going apart, color coding that, but it applies it to my entire wellbore. What we can do now is go to our area fills option and apply an interval to it. So I could say use interval. That's going to open up my area fill display interval options. I could select two formation tops. I could select the zone manager zone, apply offsets, all that kind of stuff. When I click OK here, let me just apply my interval to both of these, hit apply. That's going to only apply my area fill to within the interval that I've defined. So you can see the curve above and below that interval. So I had the F11 and the F11 base selected. Those area fills are not applied. They kind of stop at the base. They start at this top location here. And so that's kind of, you can focus in on the zone of interest without having to, and you can do this for multiple kind of zones on here as well, right? So you could always go in here to your area fills and add as many as you need for different zones. You could, because you can customize this interval per fill. So it lets you only focus in on the areas that are really important and ignore all the rest. All right, let's get back to the presentation here. And other enhancements in Petrophysics, you can now do cross plots from multiple curve sets. A few data management improvements when you were exporting lasses or UDE curves. We can detect and ignore null curves. Performance improvements in curve data statistics in UDEs, up to 30%, 30 to 50%, depending on how many wells you're working with. But that's a significant increase in performance, and also a lot of bug fixes, as always. All right, moving on to GVERSE Geophysics, and I'm going to wrap this up really quickly now. We've added the ability to share your time depth tables more easily. So you can now define control wells and have other wells point to those control wells. So just kind of make those time depth tables available for any wells that you want them to use. Makes it a little easier there. Changes to our distance measurement tool. We've added a dip and an inclination measurement on your seismic sections. We've added azimuth and time and depth distances on your map distance measurement tools. A ton of other enhancements, streamline how you open interpretations, the ability to kind of color code your intersecting lines, ability to save your grid info, a ton of other enhancements, smaller enhancements in there as well, available in 2023.2. We've also added some new Python API around deviation surveys, especially being able to set them, being able to retrieve them, also be able to update the start and stop depths of your curve sets. And specific use case for this is to be able to quickly load incoming data. So if you've got deviation data that is being updated, a well is being drilled, for example, and you want to quickly update that without having to go through the spreadsheet loader or other import mechanisms, you can just run your Python script. It will go in and set your deviation data. It will any log curves that you want to bring in as well. Does all of that for you. And finally, GVERSE Connect has now compatibility with Petrel 2023 versions, all variants of the 2023. So we support up to 2023 with GVERSE Connect. So when you're moving data between your Petrel projects and GeoGraphix projects, you can now be on Petrel 2023 as well. All right, and that's basically everything that I have for you. Like I said, a lot in there. I've kind of had to really do this very quickly. If you've got questions, if you're interested to learn more, please feel free to reach out. Give 2023.2 a try. I'm sure you're going to find something that you love in there. As always, we love hearing from you. That's kind of what drives all of our development. If you've got suggestions, feedback, criticism, anything at all, please let us know, and it helps us make the software better for everybody. So thank you, everybody, for attending, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.